Well, we are in the second week of our sermon series, God's Great Gift. God's Great Gift. And what we've been talking about is the family as God's great gift. Now, if you're just now joining us this week, that's okay. Don't feel like you've missed anything vital. We'll kind of rehash it here. Last week, we talked about the fact that God gave a great gift to you and to our world, and that gift was the family. That the family isn't some accident. It wasn't like a mistake of biology, or it's not something we came up with either. It's not our idea. We didn't sit down one day and go, hey, I think a family would be a good idea. Let's start doing that. No, God designed family, and he gave it to you, and he gave it to this world. It is a gift from God. Now, the reason sometimes, we talked about last week, the reason sometimes our family doesn't quite feel like a gift, that sometimes it feels like something else, is because the way we relate to each other sometimes is wrong. God designed the family to where relationships in the family are not supposed to be based on a contract, but on a covenant. And we talked a little bit about that last week. This week, we're going to be talking about the way the family is supposed to be laid out. You see, if the family is God's great gift, if it's something that God designed for us, for our world, and for each other, if that's the way the family was built and structured, then there's an ordering to it that's supposed to happen. There's a way that it's laid out. There's things that are in most important and second importance and third importance. And if the family's going to function right, it needs to be ordered correctly. And so this week and next week, we're going to kind of talk about that. And then the last 2 weeks of this sermon series, we're going to talk about what this gift does for us and for the world. But today we're talking about that ordering. And so when we're talking about the family being properly ordered, the first thing we need to ask ourselves is, what is the most important part of the family? What is the most important part of the family? If our family is a great gift from God and it's something that has a purpose and a design and it's supposed to do something, then we need to ask the question, well, what's the most important part of that family? I want to make sure that the important thing is the important thing. And in our culture says that children are the most important part of the family, right? Everything in our culture is geared towards our children, whether it's trying to get them to get you to buy something, or whether it's trying to, all these activities. I mean, you're kind of looked down on as like not a good parent if your kids aren't in like 25 things, and everything in our culture is about children. And so it'd be easy to say, well, children are the most important part of the family, and yet, the reality is that children aren't the most important part of the family. The marriage is. The marriage is the most important part of the family, and for the very, very simple reason that your marriage makes you better or worse. Your marriage makes you better or worse, that you will be a better parent or a worse parent based on the state of your marriage. That your ability to raise emotionally healthy and mature children, something that's hard in and of itself, that is exponentially harder when the person that you share your life with, when you and her or you and him can't get along. That when you become one with someone else and we join together and we're going to be married and we're going to be united and we're going to be together, and then that is struggling and that is breaking, everything else in your life is harder. Everything else in your life is harder. Your marriage makes you better or worse because that is you. You and your spouse become one. And so when that's struggling, you're struggling. In fact, Timothy Keller says it like this. I think he sums it up really well. Timothy Keller says, if everything around you is weak, but your marriage is strong, it doesn't matter. You will move out into the world in strength. But if everything around you is strong and your marriage is weak, it doesn't matter. You're going to move out into the world in weakness. I think that's absolutely true. That you could be failing at so many areas of your life, like at your job, it's not going the way you wanted, and you're not getting promoted, and you're struggling there to make connections, and maybe with your friends and your social circle, maybe with your parents and your extended family. There could be a lot of things going wrong in your life, but if your marriage is strong, when you leave home, you step out into the world in a position of strength. And you could have the reverse too, where everything's going good for you outside your doors, but if your marriage is struggling, then you move out into the world in a position of weakness, even if everything else is going so great for you. Your marriage makes you better and worse, and for that fundamental reason, it is the most important part of your family. It is the heart of your family. In fact, this is the way God designed it. In the beginning, God creates the world, and he puts a family in the world, and it's not a parent and a child. The family he put in the world is a husband and wife. It's a marriage, and then everything else comes later. The family comes later, but here's first. This is first and foremost. This is the cornerstone. This is what everything else is based off of. This is the foundation. This is the heart of the family. It's your marriage. In fact, the Apostle Paul in Colossians chapter 3 says that same thing. That's kind of be our text today. Colossians 3, and starting in verse 18, Paul's talking about the way a household should function, and this is what he says. It's chapter 3, verse 18. It says, "Wives, submit to yourselves to your husbands, as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives, and do not be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged." Aristotle, the philosopher Aristotle, a few hundred years before the Apostle Paul, he invented this thing called household codes. Household codes. This was the idea of these are the things that are important for a family to do. This is important for a family. In the ancient world, the family was the building block of civilization. It was the heart of civilization. So what you said about the family was very important. And so whatever you said, this is what the family should do. This is our household codes. People would judge you by it. In fact, these were so important, these household rules were so important that in the Roman Empire, if you were a kind of a radical religion or maybe a radical political or philosophical group, and the empire didn't really like you, and you were having some running in with the law, you could actually publish a set of household codes that were this is what we think is important for a family. And if they reflected the Roman version of the family, then they said, okay, you're okay. Even though religiously you're kind of out there and politically you're kind of out there and philosophically you're kind of out there, you agree with us on how the family should be run, so we're going to back off. I mean, that's how important these were. Paul here is giving his version of that. These are his household codes. This is how families that are part of God's family should function. And in the ancient world, and much like our world today still, in the ancient world, when you made a list, the first thing in the list was most important. And when Paul talks about the family, the first thing he mentions is the marriage, husbands and wives. That's right. That's the first thing. We're going to talk about the family now. First thing, husbands and wives, how you treat one another. That's the most important part of God's family. Of a family that's a part of God's family, husbands and wives, how you treat each other, that's going to be the heart of that. I mean, we don't have to look very far. I mean, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, we know people whose families have kind of deteriorated along with their marriage. That the marriage fell apart, and we've seen the effect that it has on children and the effect that it has on their community and on their family. Is it impossible to raise children without a healthy marriage? No, because of God's grace and God's power, it's not impossible. But man, we've seen how many more times have we seen damage done in a family because of a broken marriage than it work out for the better. It is so difficult. It is so damaging. In fact, we've got a great example of just the damage that can happen in the book of Kings, 1 Kings. In the book of 1 Kings, we get the story of Solomon. Solomon, who was the wisest king that ever lives. Solomon, who was the greatest king Israel ever had, expanded their nation, expanded their economy. I mean, just an incredible king. But he didn't treat his marriage as all that important. In fact, in 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 3, this is what it says. Talking about Solomon, it says he had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and his wives led him astray. So the moral of the story there is, men, is watch out for your wife because she's going to lead you astray. No, that's not really the point there. God never intended for marriage to be one man and 1,000 women. Okay? God never intended for it to be that way. And when Solomon treated his marriage as if it wasn't important, he didn't treat it in the way that God had planned it. It was a very much a broken relationship. There's way too much craziness going on. He ended up turning God's gift, the gift that God gave of the family, into a curse. And for him and for his wives and for his children, the family was a curse. And then for the rest of the world, his family, instead of being a gift for his community, instead of being a gift for his neighbors, instead of being a gift for his country, his family became a curse. In fact, when his son Rehoboam grew up, his son was so emotionally immature and arrogant that his son actually caused the nation to enter into a state of civil war, where the 10 tribes of Israel to the north broke away from the 2 tribes of Israel to the south, and they never got back together. Solomon's decision to not honor and treat his marriage as important led to his family being a curse to his country in such a dramatic and devastating way that his country was split in two and never did it return back together. The 10 tribes to the north were lost to time. When we do not treat the family the way it's supposed to be treated, it turns from a gift into a curse. It's something that causes heartache and pain for us. It's something that is a source of sadness in our lives, and it's something that can hurt not just ourselves, but our community as well. We see children who have grown up in broken homes and have carried that brokenness with them into their marriage, into their next family, and into the community. That the gift that God said this is supposed to be for you and for your neighbors and for your community, this gift that God gave the world turns into a curse. So, if my marriage is the most important thing about my family, if that's the most important part of my family, the question is, what's the next step? What's going to be next? I mean, what do I do with that information? Great, okay, the family is kind of the engine of this. The marriage is kind of the engine of the family. It's what helps it run. It's the most important component of it. I need to put it first. So what does that mean? What's next? And there's two things that I want to talk about this morning. First one, maybe you've never really thought of before or thought of it in a different way. And the second one, we all agree on it, but we never really do it that well, okay? The first thing is this. First thing I want to talk about is this. If my marriage is the most important thing about my family, it needs to be protected. If my marriage is the most important thing about my family, it needs to be protected. Now, maybe you've never really thought about protecting your marriage, right? I mean, sometimes we don't use that language. I'm going to protect my marriage. And if you have thought about it, maybe you've thought about it in very specific contexts, right? Like maybe if you're a guy, you've got some kind of fantasy of, protecting my wife. Someone breaks in and I fight them off and I protected my marriage, or maybe kind of the thing that comes to, I think, most of our minds is protecting our marriage means not cheating on our spouse, right? I'm going to protect my marriage and not do any of that. And that's all good. That's great, okay? Fighting off someone and protecting your spouse, go you, okay? Not cheating on someone. That's good. I'm glad you're doing that. But protecting your marriage is so much more than that. Protecting your marriage means so much more than that. In fact, protection means planning around. Protection means planning around. There's something I want to protect. There's something I want to keep safe. And so what do? I'm going to plan around that. I'm not going to plan around what I want. I'm not going to plan around what I would like. I'm going to plan around this because I want to protect it. Decisions that I have to make, things that come my way, I have to plan with this in mind. Protecting your marriage means playing around it. So, when someone at work asks you over to a dinner party, the answer to that isn't framed in the context of, do I like you or not? Sure, yeah, you're a cool guy. We'll get to know you better. We'll come over. Or, no, I'm busy. I can't, sorry, because I don't really like you, right? That's not the context of our answer. If I'm protecting my marriage, then when I have to make a decision, I plan around that. And so the question it's not whether or not I want to, but is that going to be a night that me and my spouse were going to do something? Have I been so busy this week that I haven't? Would that be our only night really to do anything together? How tired are they going to be? Would they want to come to this? Is this something they would enjoy? I'm going to plan around my marriage. It's not just what I want to do. It's what's going to be best for my marriage. Your child, sweet and innocent, comes to you and asks to be involved in another activity. Your answer isn't based on how much they go, please, 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 please. Your answer is based on, well, wait, that happens on Friday nights, and that's the only night of the week that we have free. That's the only night of the week me and my husband, me and my wife get to be together. Is that going to hurt my marriage, or do I need to protect it? See, when we talk about protecting something, we're talking about planning around it. We're talking about saying, okay, what is being asked of me? Well, what do you want me to do? Okay, is that going to somehow damage my relationship with my spouse, or do I need to say no? Protecting your marriage ultimately means learning how to say no to things. You only have so much time in a day. So, and I know this is going to be hard for some of you like type A, go get them people, but here's the deal. There's only 24 hours in a day. You cannot do everything, and you have to say no to some things. You must say no to some things, and you do. You say no to stuff all the time, whether or not you realize it. Whenever you say yes to something, you're saying no to everything else that could possibly have happened during that activity. Yes, I'll be there. Okay, that's great, but you're saying no to everything else that could happen that night. Every time you say yes, you're saying no. And so you already say no, even if you don't think you do. Okay, I'm always the guy that always does things, and I'm okay with that. But you've got to learn, if we're going to protect our marriage, we have got to learn to say no to things that are going to hurt our marriage, are going to hurt our relationship with our spouse. That's ultimately what this is about. I'm going to plan around my relationship, which means I have to say no to some things. Protecting your marriage goes even deeper than that, though. Protecting your marriage means protecting it from you. Here's what I mean by that. You have issues. You have problems. Now, this may be news to you, okay? This may be news to you. But whoever you're with today, if you were to ask them, hey, do I have some problems? They would very quickly tell you, yes, and here's what they are. Okay, here's what they are. Let me tell you. You have issues, you have baggage, you have problems, things that because of the way you were raised, because of your experiences in your life, because of the brokenness and the sin that you struggle with personally, you have issues and you have brought those into your marriage. Now, when you got married, you knew you had issues, but your spouse maybe didn't, okay? Your spouse maybe didn't. And your spouse knew that they had issues, but you maybe didn't know about their issues. Their biggest issue is they chew with their mouth open, right? Okay? I can get over that. That's if that's going to be the big stumbling block in our marriage, I can deal with that. But then after you've been married for a little while, all of a sudden, man, I did not realize you had a temper. I did not realize you could use words like that. I didn't know that you would call me names like that. I didn't know that you would work this much. I didn't know you were like this. And all of a sudden, after you've been married for a while, you realize, oh, you've got issues. And here's where protecting the marriage comes in. What is so easy to do is to point the finger and say, you've got issues, fix them. You've got issues, fix them. If you were nicer, if you didn't lose your temper so easily, if you would communicate, if you would do this, if you would do that, you've got issues and you need to fix them. That's not protecting your marriage. Protecting your marriage is saying, I've got issues and I need to fix them. I've got things I need to deal with. I've got problems that I have. I'm not sensitive, I'm not caring, I'm too emotional, I'm too sensitive, I don't communicate enough, I communicate too much, whatever it is, I have issues. Protecting your marriage is not pointing a finger at your spouse and saying, you need to fix your problems. Protecting your marriage is saying, I have to take responsibility for the things that are wrong in my life, and I need to fix my marriage. I need to fix me. I'm going to protect my marriage, and I want to keep it safe, and I want to provide and protect for it, and I'm going to do that by working on me. Not by pointing fingers at what's wrong in the other person, but by saying, there's things wrong in my life I could fix. Protecting your marriage means taking responsibility for who you are and for working on yourself. Protecting your marriage is so much deeper than just fighting off that random stranger. Or maybe not cheating on your spouse. Those are good things. Great. I'm glad you're going to do that. But man, there's so much more that goes into protecting your marriage. It means setting boundaries with others, setting boundaries at your work, having to say, no, I can't come in, setting boundaries with your parents. No, mom and dad, you can't come over for the 6th time this week. Setting boundaries with your kids, setting boundaries, even examining your own heart and saying, what's wrong in me? If my marriage is the most important thing about my family, then it needs to be protected. The second thing is this: if my spouse is the most important thing about my family, they need to be prioritized. If my spouse is the most important thing about my family, they need to be prioritized. Now, here's the deal. We all agree with this one, right? We're all like, yeah, sure, prioritize your spouse. That's great. But the thing is prioritizing your spouse is kind of fuzzy, right? I mean, what exactly does that mean? And what happens if you're like me, anything that's fuzzy, anything that you kind of don't understand, you always take the laziest possible option in it, okay? If I don't quite get what I'm supposed to do, if I had an assignment in college and it wasn't spelled out exactly what I should do, I was not the one who turned in like an extra 30 pages and I've got all this. No, I was like, well, I don't really know what I'm supposed to do, so here's a paragraph on something, and I think that fits the requirements that you gave me. I don't know, okay? I will always take the path of least resistance when something's really fuzzy and gray and I'm not sure what to do. And when we say prioritize your spouse, you're like, yeah, sure, okay, great. What is that? I don't really know what that looks like. And we might sit there and say, yes, we should prioritize our spouse, and then not really do it because we don't really know. What does that mean? What does that look like? Prioritizing your spouse, though, it's really simple. It's not that hard. It means prioritizing your spouse means treating them as if they are more important than you are. Prioritizing your spouse means treating them as if they are more important than you are. In fact, that's exactly what Paul says in our text. Here's what families should look like. In verse 18, he says, wives, submit yourselves to your husbands as is fitting to the Lord. Treat them as if they're more important than you are. Treat them as if they're more important than you are. Don't do what you want, do what they want. And then he goes on and says, husbands, love your wives. Do not be harsh with them. Now, we get a little off topic on this because that sounds like Paul said, wives, do something, husbands, feel something. Okay, that's what that sounds like. But Paul didn't use the word for love that means feel something. In Greek, there are different words for love, and a couple of those words mean feel something. Eros means be romantically attracted to. You feel that, right? But that's not what Paul said. Paul didn't say, wives, do this. Husbands, be romantically attracted to your wife. That's not what he said. There's another word for love, that phileo in Greek, which means affection. Okay, you're affectionate towards someone. That's not the word Paul uses. The word Paul uses in Greek is agapao, which means sacrifice for. It's a love that says, I'm not going to get my way. I'm going to do what you want. It's a love that says, you know what? What do you want to do? What should you do? What can I do for you? Oh, okay, I'm back. So Paul says in verse 18, wives, submit to your husbands, treat them as if they're more important than you are. And then verse 19 says, husbands, love your wives, sacrifice. Want to do. Do what they want to do. You see, Jesus designed the marriage to be a competition between who can be number one, but it's not I'm trying to be number one, it's you're number one. And then the other person says, no, you're number one. And you say, well, no, honey, that's silly. You're number one. And they say, no, you're number one. And it's this constant outdoing of I want to treat you as if you're more important than me. Now, are you actually more important than me? No, but I'm going to treat you as if you are. It's contextual importance. It's like going to and we've all been in those contexts where, any room you're in, are you less important than anyone else? No, we're all important in God's eyes, and we're all the same, and God loves each of us. But you've been in rooms where you are treating someone else as if they're more important. There, when the bride comes in, everyone stands. And do you go, well, no one stood when I came in. That's not fair. No, because they're more important than you. If you're sitting there thinking that it's not fair that everyone didn't stand when you came into a wedding and you're not the bride, you're kind of a monster, right? Like, these people should be standing for me. No one does that. Or afterwards, everyone lines up to talk to them. There's no one lined up to talk to me. I'm kind of jealous. And everyone's talking to the bride and groom. Why aren't people talking to me? No, they're more important than you are, and you're okay with that. And you treat them that way then. Go to maybe a dinner party held in someone's honor. We're honoring someone for their contribution or for whatever. They did something heroic or their life service, whatever it is. We're honoring someone. You're there. And they start telling a story. The honoree starts telling a story. And, man, they're leaving out crucial details, or they're just going on, or they're just not a good storyteller. Do you stand up and go, all right, I'll tell it. You just sit down. Don't hurt yourself. I'll tell the story. No, you don't do that. They could be telling the most boring story in the world, and you listen as if it's the most interesting thing in the world. Why? Because you're more important than me right now. We're honoring you, not me. And if they start telling a joke and they tell the punchline too early, or it's just not funny, okay, you don't go, oh, man. You don't do that. You laugh. Why? Because they're more important than you are right now. We all know what it's like to treat someone as if they're more important than us. We laugh at jokes that maybe aren't funny. We go places maybe we don't really want to go. We get interested in things maybe we're not really that interested in. We don't always have to be right. We don't always have to make sure everything gets corrected. Why? Because you're more important than me. And it's okay. It's okay. You're not a reflection of me. You're not reflecting poorly on me. You're not hurting my image. Why? Because you're more important than I am. You're more important than me. Is this kind of relationship easy? Is treating your spouse constantly as if they're more important than you, this other person that you spend all your time with, and suddenly you have to always treat them as if they're more important than you are? Is that easy? Absolutely not. There's no way that's easy. It's not easy because we are incredibly selfish, right? We are incredibly self-centered. I never realized how selfish I was till I got married, okay? I thought I was really selfless and humble and just an all-around good guy. And then I got married, and I was like, I am a jerk, and I do everything for me, and man, I am so self-centered. Because this whole being with someone else all the time and holding them up and saying, you're more important than me, I mean, that's not easy. But nothing worth it is ever easy, right? I don't think I've ever seen anyone, like, after they win the Super Bowl and they're getting interviewed and they're like, yeah, it's pretty easy. I mean, I didn't really do anything, and I didn't really show up to practice, and I didn't work at it at all. No, nothing worthwhile is ever easy. And to have a marriage that's worth something, to have a family that's worth something, that's not going to be easy. The love of the marriage is based on the love of Jesus. If you notice in our text, it says, wives, submit to your husbands as in the Lord. It's based on Jesus. You do this because that's what Jesus did. And it says, husbands, love your wives. And the word for love is a God love. Agapao is the way Jesus loved us. The love in a marriage is based, this whole you are more important than me, is based on the love that Jesus had for us. See, Jesus was the most important person in the world. You may, in reality, if we had scales here, you may not be more important than me, and I'm not more important than you. We're all equal. But when Jesus was here, he was more important than everybody. But he treated us as if we were more important than him. He said, no, you're more important than me. You're more important than me. Our love for our spouse is supposed to be based on the love of Jesus. And what was the love of Jesus like? Was it a love that said, okay, I'll clean up the house without being asked? No, it was actually bigger than that. Was it a love that said, okay, I'll pick up the kids again from school? No, it was a love that was bigger than that. It was a love that was much bigger than all these things that we think of and that maybe sometimes irritate us and get on our skin. And man, I can't believe I have to do this again. And I wish they would pitch in. And no, man, Jesus' love was way bigger than any of that. Jesus went and died for us. He was more important than we are, and he said, I'm going to treat you like you're more important than I am, though. And he went and died for us. We should have died for him. But he said, no, you're more important than I am. And he went to the cross for us. That's Jesus' love. And so in our marriage, when we talk about loving each other and treating each other as if they're more important than us, man, that's the example. That's the example. Your marriage is the engine that powers the greatest gift that God gave this world, which is the family. Your family is supposed to be God's gift to the world. When God made the world, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, and then at the end of day 6, he put the family in the world and he said, okay, rule it, change it, go with it, you're in charge. He created the world, he put a family in charge. God has always believed that your family has the power to change the world. That's how powerful the family is. Your family is a gift to you and to the world. And because our marriages are so important to that family, we need to protect them. We need to prioritize them. We need to plan around them. We need to do everything with them in mind. We need to prioritize our spouse and treat them as if they're more important than we are. We need to protect and prioritize our marriage. And one last thing. Here's the last thing. Because your marriage is so important to your family, and because your family is so important to God's plan, Satan will always attack your family. The enemy will always try to undermine your relationship with your spouse. Whether it's through our culture, whether it's through our social circles, our friends, whether it's through our work, whether it's through our family, the enemy will always try to undermine your relationship. There will never be a time in your life when your marriage is not on the line because there is someone out there actively trying to destroy it. And so, we need to actively protect it. We need to actively protect it. It is the most important part of God's great gift to our world. And so we need to be a people who protect and prioritize our marriage. We need to be a group of people who encourage one another when we're, those who are in marriages. If you're in a marriage, we need to be a people who know that our marriage is what's most important. If you're single and you're not married right now, let's be a group of people who encourage those who are and say, hey, I know what you're going through. I know how hard it is. I just want to tell you, to encourage you to keep going because what you're doing is so vital to God's great gift to this world. Let's be a place. Let's be a community that treats marriages as if they are the most important thing in the world, because in a lot of ways, they are. Would you pray with me? God, we love you, and we thank you so much for your son, Jesus, and we thank you so much for the love that he showed us and what it means to treat others as if they are more important than us. God, help us to use that example in our relationships with our friends, with our coworkers, with our bosses, with the people we meet in the street, with our families. God, may we specifically use that relationship, may we specifically use that example in our relationship with our spouse. God, may our relationship with our spouse be something that we protect and prioritize. May we put boundaries up to keep it safe. And God, may we hold up the other as that which is more important than us. God, if we do this, we know that incredible things can happen. God, you've structured the family in such a way that the marriage is at the heart of it, and you've structured our marriage to be these kind of relationships. And if we make them that, if we can create this environment, then God, I know that incredible things will happen in our lives and in the lives of those that we love and know in our community. God, I pray that we have the strength to do it. I know it's not going to be easy. God, may we leave here empowered by your Spirit to be Spirit-filled husbands and Spirit-filled wives, to be a Spirit-filled family, Father, to do that which isn't easy so that we can be what you've designed us to be. God, we love you, and we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.